Welcome to the Motoring Podcast, a Lexus Mindfulness Special Edition. Hello, I'm Alan, and yes, it's a Friday morning Alan interview special edition. So no Andrew today, but instead I'm joined by Christoph Spiessens. Christoph, hello.
Hi, Alan.
Hi. So, Christoph, the reason we've got you along today is that you've been working with Lexus on some mindfulness music tracks and how to use them generally in the car, at home, whatever. Would you like to take a couple of minutes just to quickly introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm happy to be here and that I think it's really cool that you are exploring a perhaps different kind of topic on your podcast. So well done. I think that's a courageous thing to do. I'm a Belgian guy living in Manchester for the past 20 years. I'm the founder of the Manchester Mindfulness Festival. I'm a certified coach and learning and development consultant, and I'm also a mindfulness teacher.
Cool. Awesome.
That's me in a nutshell.
That's a pretty impressive nutshell, to be perfectly honest. No, it's great. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat to us today. I think probably before we talk about the actual tracks themselves and any of and how we use them, can we talk about mindfulness to start with? Because I think that might be a new idea to an awful lot of people. It's certainly something I'm still getting my head around.
Sure. It's a great question to start. And it's also not an easy question to answer, Alan. So I will do my level best to be concise. But it is a little bit like asking me to define what love is or art is, for example.
Yeah.
There's different perspectives on this. But, to be succinct, mindfulness is a trainable and secular skill. Yeah, it's a form of attention training, and it's all about non-judgmental present moment awareness.
Okay.
A study from Harvard tells us that for approximately 47% of the time, we are distracted. We are not in the present moment. So, it's fair to say that we miss almost half of our lives. So through mindfulness practice, we bring our attention back into the present moment, non-judgmentally. And that's, I'm going to leave it at that for now. I'm sure we can unpack this later on.
Yeah, but I think that's a really good intro to it, because I think many of us, I mean, I'm one of these people with one of these terrible watch things. And I think that it says about mindfulness and you think, well, actually, that's probably quite a focused thought of it, but I think that's what jumps to people's minds generally. So
that, and also that it could be potentially quite fluffy and soft and esoteric and all of those things, which it isn't. It takes a lot of practice and daily practice to train the mind and hence the brain into new ways of performing. So it's not easy. It's simple, but it is not easy.
Yeah,
per se.
There is such a difference between the words something that's simple and something that's easy. It's,
oh yeah, absolutely.
People kind of forget that and just and lose track of it. So if that's the case with mindfulness, then why is it important when we're driving? I mean, here on the podcast we've talked a few times in the past about stories about how being in the car and driving can be a very calming thing to do, and it can help you sort of reset your head. And one of the reason is because during the pandemic, when more and more of us have been working from home, and people have been commuting less, then people have missed that period in the car, which is the transition between home and work. Is that the kind of thing we're talking about here, or is that tangential to it?
No, I suppose these Lexus mindfulness tracks can really help with that. And I like the word that you use, the transition from one place to the next, which can be really important on the way to work, like getting yourself into gear, into the right mindset, arriving in the office with the right focus. And then on the way home, arriving home in a way that is going to be good for both yourself and the rest of the family potentially.
Yeah.
So, and I think generally speaking, if you had to kind of categorize the benefits of mindfulness, Alan, you can, this is very broadly speaking, you can put them into three categories: better emotional regulation,
Okay.
memory learning, and also perspective taking and, you know, attention training. So you can see how these are very relevant to the driving experience, because it's all about being as attentive as you can and paying as much attention as possible when you're driving, but also emotional regulation in terms of, you know, driving. You said it can be a relaxing experience. It's not always the case, is it?
No, I
We're
was going
stuck
to
in
come to that
traffic.
next.
Exactly. So the emotional regulation through the perspective taking by practicing mindfulness can be really, really helpful. Now, before we continue, I do want to stress, and I'm sure you'll want me to stress this as well, that when we hear mindfulness, often we think meditation, and then it's like, well, how does that square up with driving?
It's exactly what I
So
was going to ask next. So thank you. Yes.
so if I may, definitely do not close your eyes when you practice mindfulness meditation when you're driving. Having said that, you could perhaps practice for a few seconds before you switch on the engine, or before, you know, you enter your house. So there are moments where you are welcome to close your eyes, but definitely not when you're driving. And I'm sorry to state the obvious, but it's important.
No, it really is. Sorry, I was going to ask you a question that led to
Sure.
exactly the same anyway. So I'm really glad you covered that.
And
So
also, and I'm going to, sorry to jump in, Alan, but it's one of these things. Mindfulness offers us an invitation to look at things with a fresh pair of eyes, with a beginner's mind. And so, very often, when people hear mindfulness or meditation, it's immediately linked to, oh, close your eyes and do some practice. Well, it's good to know that you have a choice when you practice. Any teacher who tells you to close your eyes in a very direct and directive way, that is not helpful for people, because for many people, closing the eyes might be quite a triggering experience. So know that you always have a choice. You could simply lower your gaze, you could focus on something on the wall, you could use a different anchor, as we say. So it's just important to point this out.
okay. So what do you? This was about to be a really tricky question. I don't know if I've got the wording right here, so please twist it however you need. But what do you recommend? What do you advise that people do to try and bring a little bit of mindfulness when they're in the car, as well as, you know, maybe when you get in? I assume a few deep breaths or similar to just calm yourself down,
No,
or
it's
put
it's
yourself
a
to
great
place.
question.
What do you
It
think?
really is. So in mindfulness, everything rests on the tip of intention. So intention is a huge concept. So it's about making a choice. Do I want to practice mindfulness? Do I want to become more mindful? Am I aware of my stress levels? Am I aware of my deteriorating mental health, for example? But you don't have to have, mental health concerns in order to explore mindfulness. You might be feeling absolutely on top of the world, and you may want to enhance or keep that state by practicing mindfulness. So it's helpful for, across the spectrum, really. But I think it's all about the intention, and then also your attitude. And in fact, intention, attention, and attitude are the three components of mindfulness. And psychologically, when those three components, intention, attention, and attitude, work synergistically, a metacognitive process happens, which is called decentering. And it allows you to step back from your thoughts. So you can observe your thoughts rather than being caught in them, so to speak. And that helps you to relate to what you're thinking rather than from what you're thinking. And it really makes a difference between being inside stressful thoughts and being kind of standing, on the edge and looking at your mind's activity.
So to try and bring that to an imaginary situation, say
Yeah.
you're driving, and you reach, I don't know, a roundabout or a junction. Somebody cuts you up. It's about realizing, hang on, why am I getting wound up by this?
Yeah.
Take a step back, have a quick breath, and just go. And just, it doesn't actually matter to me that person has done that. Nothing has come out of it. Fundamentally, it's happened. There's nothing I can change about it. Move on. Is that a little bit of?
I think
Have
it's
I
a
got the
great
right
example.
kind of idea?
You do, you certainly do, Alan. And I think it's a great practical example, one that all of us can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's be honest. In mindfulness, we often talk about this non-judgment component, like non-judgmentally paying attention to what's happening in the present moment. That doesn't mean that we're going to become softies and pushovers. It's okay to have an opinion, and opinions are very necessary at times. So to use your example at the roundabout, you will have an automatic reaction to the situation. That's fine. Where the mindfulness comes in
Mm-hmm.
is that you are aware of your reaction, and then again, it's the looking at it from the outside rather than being inside, in the frustration, in the anger, and then you can say, okay, I realize what's happening. Yes, I was in danger there potentially for a few seconds, but it's gone now, like you say, and I need to not dwell on this.
Yeah.
Because very often what happens when one thing happens, then we automatically link it to other drivers, and then within seconds the whole world is against us.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But been there, done it. Got the T-shirt.
Yeah.
I think we all have at one
it's
point
human
or
nature.
another.
It's literally human nature, and it's how the brain is. Long story short, everything in the brain connects constantly to each other, and the brain is constantly making those connections, trying to provide a context and trying to give you reasons as to why you think your anger is just.
Yeah. I'm just laughing. Yes, I absolutely agree and understand that, and I'm not a particularly angry person, so these things happen.
Yeah.
So let's move on from that, and let's talk about the tracks and how you expect them, or how they can help people with this. Because what I'll do is I'll put there's a kind of taster track. I'll put that at the end of the podcast. So once I've done my outro, as usual, everyone, then there'll be, I think it'll be almost a couple of minutes, which is just a taster of what these are. And if you want to describe them from a sort of music genre, then I guess my music supply streaming service would call them as ambient electronic. Is kind of where they fit in. If that gives you an idea what they are. But Christoph, how I don't want to sound really pretentious, but how are they composed? Because they all have a slightly different rhythm. They all feel slightly different. But how could people use those to help with what we've just discussed about mindfulness?
Yeah. So do you know how I said I used the word reactivity a few moments ago?
Yeah.
The roundabout example. So you will hear, when you play these tracks, you will hear some very interesting sounds and combinations of sounds. And they're all very cleverly done, I have to say. But you may very well have the initial reaction that I had when I first heard them. And I thought, what on earth do these tracks have to do with mindfulness? Because some are quite upbeat and perhaps the opposite to sitting on a meditation cushion and burning some incense.
I was about to jokingly say it's not all
Yeah.
about sort of and tinging noises and chanting and stuff. That they are not. Yeah, they are, as I say, sort of ambient electronic music. That they're not chanting or anything.
Exactly. Yeah. But this is where the reactivity piece comes in. It's about the noticing how these sounds arrive literally in your ears as raw sounds, and then noticing how you thought, oh, I thought it was going to go in this direction, but actually we're going into that direction. And where is my brain taking me? Again, it's trying to connect dots. It's trying to make sense of this. And am I enjoying this? Am I judging the sounds? Am I, all of this activity of the mind that is happening to be aware of that, to notice what's happening, and then see if you can be with those sounds for what they are.
Yeah.
And so that's really the mindfulness practice in that moment.
And it's quite interesting. I mean, you said the raw sounds, and
Yeah.
that's a really good description of it, because they've not been put together with instruments. They've been put together with sound samples from various aspects of Lexus cars, and that's the Lexus link really there. So sometimes things that sound like a sort of more bass drum, it turns out it's been done by slamming a boot lid. Not that you need to slam a boot lid on a Lexus. It says making the PR happy. Or even for white noise from the washers. And it's those kind of things. And to be honest, it's not really that obvious what they're from, but you just know that they're not a traditional instrument. And I think that adds to, when you're right. I've been through the tracks a couple of times. I've had them playing whilst I've been working. And it's kind of interesting how it does. You think the tune's going to go one way, you think the rhythm's going to go one way, and it does a little meander or a little change. And it does actually, it's funny because it does actually make you think, even if it's just in the background. I know that sounds really pretentious, everyone. I'm sorry, you can knock me down on social media, but that was how I felt about it.
Yeah. And that noticing is the mindfulness.
Okay.
And if you can notice your reaction to something with the least amount of judgment, the better.
Okay.
And why, if you don't mind me expanding on this for a moment, because I think it's relevant to make this relevant and practical for your listeners, is because if you manage to be with those sounds, literally be with the sound. In mindfulness world, it's important to know the difference between being and doing. So if you can be with the sounds in a non-judgmental manner, then you also cultivate the muscle of being with other things in life that you may find unexpected, unpleasant, perhaps uncomfortable. And so you can grow that capacity of learning how to be with the discomfort. And that's going to be helpful in, around the family table, Christmas dinners, for example, or, stressful work meetings, your commute, obviously I appreciate we're talking about cars, but if you have to be on public transport, whatever. So you see, and that's really why mindfulness, I was going to say the magic of mindfulness, but that's why mindfulness matters. You grow capacity.
Yeah, and obviously these tracks work whether you're at home, whether you're in the car, whether you're, as you say, on public transport, because it's trying to achieve the same thing, I guess.
Yes,
it's just a very, very clever link back.
The reason why I'm keen to use public transport is because I had a panic attack once on a tram here in Manchester a couple of years ago, and it really was a catalyst for me to pick up my mindfulness practice again, and take it to another level, and then become interested in teaching it. And as I share my story with people, it turns out that many people can relate to moments of anxiety or wobbles or panic attacks or feeling panicky, and they never really had a way to chat about it and to unpack it. Yeah,
especially at the minute when I think that some of us we've got out of practice at being in large groups of people in public spaces. I mean, I've tried to be quite good about it, but I've definitely got friends who are still not quite comfortable going out in the way that they were before. So this, once again, just being aware of these kind of things can help in that sort of situation too, I guess. This has turned into a psychology podcast, and it wasn't meant to, but it's important and it's all related.
True. And I guess your intention and my intention is to make it relevant for people. Yeah, and helpful.
Absolutely. Fantastic.
So do you have a favorite track, Alan?
I do actually. Now, the track names are kind of funny. I'll just run through them for people, just so they know. So, and please don't be put off by this. There is Calming Duet of Seat Motor and Tailgate Warning Bell, Lexus Uplifting Idle Engine, and Lexus Rhythmic Warmth from Screens. I can't say it. I'm so sorry. Lexus Rhythmic Warmth from Screen Spray. You see, they didn't do this with podcasting in mind. But my favourite one actually is Lexus Infotainment Groove, which sounds nuts. but it's, well, it doesn't sound nuts. The name sounds nuts, but it's made up of the sort of the bings and bongs that you get from a Lexus entertainment system and different tones of those. And that sounds so silly, but it's actually, I really like it. It's the longest track. It's 4.5 minutes ish, 4 minutes 20 something, I think. But most of these are just a couple of minutes long as well. So they're not, this isn't, what we're talking about here isn't something which you spend 20 minutes doing. It's something which you maybe spend a minute, 2 minutes doing in these kind of situations. But yeah, so it's my favorite. What about you, Christoph? Which do you have any?
I really like
favorites?
the duet, the title with the duet in. Is it seatbelt and something else?
Seatbelt and tailgate warning bell.
That's the one, yes. Which is the more esoteric one and the more mellow one. But again, very interesting composition and use of sounds. And for me, that's an ideal gear changer between finishing up for the day and closing my laptop and focusing on friends and family. That's the one that does it for me.
Yeah, because the one I chose actually is the most energetic of them all.
Yeah. Well, I think they all serve different purposes and they are
Mhm.
very useful for different moments of the day and different occasions.
Okay, I think we've covered most of that. But if people want to know more, then if you want to listen to the tracks for starters, then they're available on Spotify. There'll be a link in the show notes. There'll also be a link to the Lexus blog as well, and you'll be able to listen to the tracks from within the blog too. But Christoph, if people want to know more about you and your work, what's the best way for them to find that out and find out how to get in touch?
Okay, I suppose the best way is to go to my website, christophspiessens.com, and you'll find plenty of free resources there, including guided mindfulness meditations, which you can also find on the app Insight Timer. I have a teacher profile on there. And there are many wonderful mindfulness apps out there, so I don't want to just drop that one name. There's a great choice out there for people to explore, and many are scientifically underpinned. So great free resources.
Excellent. Well, I'll put a link to Christoph's website in the show notes as well. So if you do want that, then at motoringpodcast.com, find this episode, and then you'll be able to follow the link through. Christoph, thank you so much for your time. I've found it incredibly interesting. I hope the listeners have as well. And as I said, after I've done the outro, then we'll have a sample of each of these 4 tracks, just so that we can all listen to that.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Anyway, folks, don't forget that between now and next time, you can give us any feedback, share your thoughts with the show at Motoring Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, on Facebook, and on the contact page of motoringpodcast.com, the hub of all our activities. Please don't forget to leave a review and rating on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or however your podcast app lets you do such a thing. To get in touch with me, it's best to use Twitter, where I'm at AJP Bradley, that's Bradley. And to get in touch with Andrew, search for Cracked Windscreen on Twitter. We'll be back before very long, but until then, I've been Alan Bradley, and safe motoring.